Hey game designers, in this video we're going to cover how to make the arm sockets and arms for the female model. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first thing, let's make sure that our symmetry is on object X because what we're doing on the right will affect the left. I'm going to switch back to poly view. So if you guys see the poly view, some of her curves look very jagged, but if you turn it back to smooth view, which is what we're going to do ultimately in the end anyway, you will see that what we're exporting will look very close to the curves on the reference model. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and go to face mode, and we're going to decide where we're going to extrude to figure out which faces we want to extrude to make her arms. So if you guys can see here on my front view that these four look like the best choices to go ahead and create her arm sockets. Okay, so just like the Homer example, we're going to go to vertex mode, and we're going to select the 9 vertices that make up those 4 faces, and we're going to circularize them, because if we extrude this, it's going to look very blocky. So we're going to go to edit mesh, and we're going to go to circularize, and it's going to circularize these points as best it can. The algorithm isn't perfect, so one of the things we are going to do is go ahead and rotate these points a little bit to kind of make it look a little bit more upright and symmetrical. So I'm going to click on E, and I'm going to rotate the arm socket a little bit to kind of create some symmetry here. And I'm then going to go ahead and use the move tool to move some of these vertices so that the geometry looks a little bit more symmetrical. So that one looks like it's a little bit off. This one looks like it's a little bit off. Okay, and the next thing we'll do is actually use the move tool to kind of get the arm sockets to be nice and vertical, so that when we go ahead and extrude it, it's going to be very horizontal. So right now my middle point's at 1.25. I'm going to go to each of these vertices and go to 1.25 and create a nice vertical arm socket. Okay, so we're just going to go around the ring and make all of their x coordinate the same. So I'm just going to select these individually and go to 1.25. Again, there's no tool, that at least that I know of, that allows you to move selected points to an exact location. I've seen it done to grids, but not to an exact location. So I'm just going to do a quick check to make sure all my points here are 1.25, and you can kind of look at the front view here that it does look very vertical, all these 9 points. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and start creating some of the sections of the arm. So we're going to go to the face tool, and we're going to start collecting on these faces, and we're going to do our first extrusion. So just the first one for now. And I'm going to use Control E to extrude, and make sure that your object X symmetry is on. And I'm going to extrude just the first section of her shoulder. Okay, the first moving joint, which will be at the shoulder. Okay, and at this point now, if we're going to lead the way the reference is right now, we're going to have to eyeball the geometry of her arm, and I don't like that. So let's go ahead and teach you guys a quick way that we could kind of angle our reference so that we can kind of have a reference about her arm. Okay, so I'm going to go into group 1, which is my reference group here, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. So go to edit, duplicate, or just Control D, and now I have 2 groups of references. So on the first group, I'm going to hide it, and on the second group, I'm actually going to use the rotate tool and rotate it so that I can kind of get the arm to be kind of horizontal. So I'm kind of rotating it right now so that it's nice and horizontal. And I'm going to use the W tool, and I'm going to move that arm kind of right where my arm socket is. Okay. All right, move it a little bit higher. And that looks good. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. We're not going to get, an exact horizontal arm from this reference, but we kind of get an idea of the thickness that we're dealing with here, so that we can figure out how thick her arm is, how thick her forearm is, how thick her wrist is, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we just got an idea right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back and let's go ahead and click back on our faces. So I'm going to go back and click back on our cylinder or mesh, and we're going to go ahead and click back on the four faces that are going to extrude. So we have this extrusion here, and we extruded it, and I think even right now you kind of see that this arm socket is too big for her arm. So we're going to use the scale tool and kind of scale it down a little bit. Okay. So I got this view right here and this view right here, and that looks about right for where her arm is. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control E again to extrude again another section here for her arm. Remember, 2 sections for every moving joint. So this will be the shoulder moving part. And now we're going to make sections for her bicep. So her bicep doesn't have crazy number of muscles, so we don't going to have to create too crazy here. So I'm going to do just 2 sections. So I'm going to extrude again, create a section for her bicep, and then extrude again to create another section for her bicep tricep area. And when I get to about the elbow, I'm going to create 2 small sections for the elbow, like so. And now I'm going to extrude probably 2 sections for her arms. So I'm going to extrude out for her arms, and then extrude again for her arms, her forearm that is. And her arms are nice and really lengthy here. And that goes to about, her wrist goes about here. So I'm going to do 2 small sections for her wrist. Now, obviously, her arms are not perfect octagonal cylinders here, but now that we have all these extrusions that we need, we can go in now and go ahead and start changing some of these edge loops. Okay, so I've got to edge mode now, and I'm going to teach you how to kind of change these vertices, these edge rings without doing vertice. So before we were doing vertex modes like this, and we're kind of clicking all of it like this, and we're kind of scaling it down, like we were doing before with the body and trying to get definition and whatnot. But there's another way to do this. So if you're having a hard time clicking on vertices, you can click on edge, and you can double click on an edge, and it'll click on the entire edge loop. Okay. So I'm gonna click on this entire edge loop, and I'm gonna go ahead and scale down a little bit to what I think her arm is, and I'm gonna click on this edge loop, which is the middle of her bicep. Make sure you double click, and I'm gonna scale. Just give her a little bit of taper. So just give her some definition for her bicep here. This is going to be her elbow, which, she's, make sure you double click, like not what I just did. Double click on the edge loop, and I'm going to scale down on her elbow here to kind of give her a little bit of a bicep. And I'm going to double click on this edge loop and move it up or down. So elbows, usually don't really have that much here. But here's when, if you look at the reference, she has a really relatively big forearm. So I'm going to kind of let it taper out a little bit here and start making her forearm. So her forearm, it's kind of big, but it does taper down. So I'm going to click on the next edge loop, and I'm going to taper down like that to kind of give it kind of a downward sloping here. And her wrists are very, very tiny. So we're going to kind of scale down to something like that. I'm going to click and closer to this edge loop right here and kind of tailor it down because she has a relatively small wrist. I'm going to double click that and click it like that. And actually, I don't know if I clicked on the edge loop or not. That didn't look right. Let's Control Z that. Yeah, it looks like I didn't click on the edge loop. So when you're clicking on edge loops, this is why sometimes I like the vertice method better. I click on all these vertices and make sure I grab all of them and taper in or out. So I'm going to taper it down a little bit here to kind of meet her wrist. And there you have it. So you got a little bit of definition here, a forearm here. Let's go ahead and click on or change to smooth view with number 3. And you kind of see what her arm will look like in smooth view. Okay. So we have bicep here, forearm here, wrist here, and that does it for our video. So we kind of got her arms ready to go. We'll cut out these circles later and start preparing for making her hands and welding those. Okay. All right. So that does it for this video.